Okay, we're going to talk, I think, mainly about decarbonisation and the challenges of decarbonisation. From your point of view, how does it look for our industry?
It's undoubtedly a very large-scale challenge. I mean, the first thing that comes up in any conversation is obviously the cost of decarbonisation and the lack of infrastructure. But the other thing that we see with our customers is kind of the complexity that goes with it. There's a whole range of factors that don't go along with diesel that need to be considered when you're transitioning to EV. And that can create a real challenge for sort of fleet managers who, I guess for the first time, have to kind of work collaboratively with a whole load of different business functions in order to get a workable solution for their business.
So just give us a bit more of a flavour about what those problems are.
So the complexity really relates to sort of the different capabilities of sort of electric vehicles versus diesel vehicles. So you may be managing sort of like reduced payload and range and figuring out how to fit that within your operation. But also there's the charging infrastructure. So that's something which is completely new and alien to people who know about vehicle technologies. And they have to deal with that for the first time. They become interested in what a sort of grid connection is and a distribution network operator. But also what that infrastructure does is for the first time it couples your transport and building energy demands together. And so that there's then a series of complex trade-offs that you need to make in order to sort of like try and even get the vehicles charged and out on the road.
So what part does data play in this process that you're describing?
So the data can be really powerful in that process, and there's a couple of areas in which that we apply it. So the first is to do with planning the transition. That you can build very rich simulations using all of the data that commercial vehicle operations generate to understand sort of what's happening now and also what will happen when you transition different parts of the fleet. And doing it at sufficiently granular scale enables you to build this kind of really rational transition plan of like, well, we can do this now, there's a good business case. This is really difficult, so we have to wait for technology to change. And in order to do this bit in the middle, we have to prove this in our pilots. You can also sort of do what-if scenarios in order to get to a kind of optimum that helps you to materially reduce the costs of the transition by making smarter kind of capital decisions. The other place you can use data is for real-time operations. So we see in our customers a real kind of tendency to sort of over-specify sort of vehicles and over-specify infrastructure to create a kind of safety margin because people are unfamiliar with and uncertain of the technology. Now, that can be a real problem because actually that you're taking something which has got a sort of a difficult business case already and you're pushing it sort of further into the red, as it were. And so that what you can do if you're doing real-time management using the data is you can run a much leaner system which gets you closer to having a business case, and your resilience comes from the system being able to respond to things like what happens if you use a charger, what happens if you lose a vehicle. And doing resilience that way is a lot cheaper than having sort of spare vehicles or really big EV chargers sitting in your yard that don't get used.
You touched on the issue of cost there. Cost is the big problem for many businesses.
Undoubtedly.
So how does all this reduce cost in simple terms?
So it's about right-sizing the specification of your vehicles and infrastructure. And so that brings you closer to the business case. And then once you've done that, you then need to push the utilisation as far as you possibly can, whilst charging the vehicles at the lowest possible cost. And that's how you deliver the best business case for the transition.
A lot of what you're talking about sounds similar to the sort of work that Microlise are doing. How do you and Microlise work together, if indeed you do at all?
We do work with Microlise, and actually that sort of our electrification specialism is kind of a continuation of what Microlise and the rest of the logistics industry has been doing for years. So that, you know, you put telemetry on vehicles so you can manage uptime. We put telemetry on chargers so we can ensure that they perform at the same level. That you have scheduling optimization tools like yard management, routing systems that ensure that you can do the maximum amount with the vehicles that we have, and that our systems are about sort of optimizing that within the constraints of EVs. And so what we've done is we've built a series of interconnections with various parts of the Microlise universe so that operators can continue using Microlise for all of their sort of core functions and have these sort of EV specific bits of functionality kind of bolt onto the whole system, rather than having some kind of separate system that does chargers, another separate system that does EV telemetry, another separate system that does EV scheduling. It's all sort of unified into one system that integrates into Microlise.
So hardware innovations, is that the sort of hardware innovations you're interested in, or are there other issues as well?
Predominantly FPS is a software business.
Yeah.
And so we talked a bit about the planning and the real-time operations piece. But there's kind of a bit in the middle as well, which is about getting the vehicles and the infrastructure into your fleet. so that our business has a hardware capability as well, so that we're capable of modifying vehicles to meet customers' needs. So an example would be that we help Waitrose to build an EPTO for their vehicles so they could connect the fridge to the main traction battery and cleared it with the OEM, as well as helping them to trial wireless charging by converting those vehicles. We also have the ability to deploy infrastructure, and so having that engineering team alongside the software team means that the business isn't just a group of guys in hoodies who've never seen a truck in a basement in London. It's sort of like we have real experience of actually trying to get this stuff done.
That makes sense. If I was able to wave a magic wand and grant you one wish, what do you think? What would that be today?
Well, so our business is all about trying to accelerate decarbonisation because we know it's something which is absolutely essential. And I think it would be to sort of remove some of the barriers. And, we'd all like huge subsidies and things like that, but I think the current economic climate, that's not going to happen. So really sort of what I wish for is for people to try and make the maximum use of data which is available to them, and also to try and work collaboratively within their organisations, because getting electrification right really is a kind of multi-actor task, not just a problem for fleets.
Great, that's marvellous. Michael, thank you very much indeed
Pleasure.
for talking to us.